Hello, good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Marita Clark, founder of Single Parent Action Network, and this afternoon we'll be discussing single fatherhood in Trinidad and Tobago. Today we have a father, a psychologist, and a social worker. And this afternoon we'll be discussing single fatherhood in Trinidad and Tobago. The psychologist is Mr. Anderson Sandy, the social worker is Mr. Alexander Thomas, and with us we have Mr. Carlos, who's a father, and we are here to discuss issues surrounding single fatherhood. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
For us
afternoon.
at Good afternoon. For us at PAN, our main concerns and issues that most single parents experience, and we start off with, is custody and visitation issues. Some of the issues surround one parent not giving access to the other and causing emotional, psychological, and other issues towards the parent and the child. Mr. Carlos, could you give us an insight of what experiences you had as a single father?
I I was married, and when my daughter had a daughter, when she was 5 years old, my wife left, and my daughter stayed with me. And from that time on, she remained with me until the day before she got married. Apparently, she didn't want me to put on she makeup on she wedding day and dress she and things. But so my experience go from nursery, from primary school to university until the child left, until the adult left home and got married. Um, Basically, the day when my ex-wife left, I remember distinctly my daughter turning to me and telling me she was hungry. And that dawned on me that I was totally responsible for raising a child, for everything concerning that child, that I was totally responsible. So I took up that responsibility. But where custody and thing is concerned, when the ex left, she stated, well, she took the child with her, that the child was living with her, and that I would have to pay maintenance. It took 2 years for the case to be called before the court. By the time it was called before the court, the child was settled living with me. So the thing about maintenance and all that was not, what to say, it was null. It was a moot point. So I had full custody of the child and the mother had a visitation right. How that came about is that the first 3 months when after separation, the child lived with me, went to school by me, and visited the mother. The next 3 months, the child lived with the mother and visited me, went to school, did everything. After that 6 month period, it was settled that the child would live with me and the mother would have visitation rights. That was based on, well, based on the child, not based on me or the child. And I would say, as a single parent, well, from the time my child was born, as a parent, it dawned on me that when my daughter said daddy, it wasn't that she was thinking male or female, man or woman, but she was attempting to develop a special relationship with this individual. And I recognized it as such from the time she was born, that this was a special relationship between me and she. And it would be unique between us, no matter if I didn't have any other children. No matter what, that relationship would remain unique. And I would like to see parents, male or female, see it not as man or woman, but see it in that light. Some things which I remember when my daughter was in secondary school. She, about 3 months after starting secondary school, she came and told me she was in one of those prestige girl school. She told me that some of her friends told her on the day when they registered, they were looking at her to see who her brother was. I mean, to see who her sister was that was going to register for the school. Because they thought she was a boy. And so they're telling her, well, so after, when they realized she was the one registering, when school started, they were looking at her carefully to see if she was a tomboy or what she was. And they get to realize she was no different from all the other girls, because growing up with her father only, obviously she took on my mannerisms, my whatever, however I do it, that is what she do. So they really thought they were looking at a boy. She was athletic. She was on a national team at the time. So she had broad shoulders, strong legs, arms with guns. She used to wear cap and slippers. The cap, because what she was involved in, the hair couldn't be properly combed at any time. So they said they really thought they were looking at a boy. But the point which I'm making is that children, whether single or it's a home where both mother and father, but for us, single children, ears are closed to what we tell them, and their eyes open to what they see we do. And as a single parent, I always use that as a guide in whatever I was doing. All right, thanks for the introduction.
Wow. So you did an excellent job as a father, a single father, right? So one of the questions we wish to ask, during that time of you being a single father, were you having any sort of burnout? Were you experiencing a difficulty in balancing work and being a single father? Could you share and enlighten us some more, please?
Before I became a single father, I was involved in coaching. I was a coach of our football team. I was also active in certain aspects in the church where I had some roles to play. In work, well, there's always a lot of things going on in work. And once I became a single parent, I stopped coaching. I stopped going to football practice. The things which are involved in church, I had to cut back on a lot of the activities, because the time just wasn't there anymore. And then I realized that a lot of the things which I used to do, I was able to do it because I had support at home. And now with that support going, I had a choice to either continue doing or to devote the time into ensuring that my child is okay. There's a financial part to it, in that I had my own we had our own property that was that had to be disposed of, and I had to decide whether I would go back into buying a property or continue renting, because as we know, children grow older and the expenses go up. And I had to continue renting, because if I didn't do that, then I would not be able to meet the expenses. I must say, though, that university was in America. I paid for it out of my own pocket. I'm living in my own home now. So all the sacrifices back then were more than worth it. Thank you.
Wow. So basically, you on your own.
Yep. No backup. No. If I don't pick you up on the evening, well, somebody go pick you up. If I don't cook, you go get food. It was just me. Sick leave was for the daughter, not for me.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Kevon. We are glad to have you. Thanks for being here. So we were just speaking to an older father, and you are a younger father. So we just asked him about what was his experiences with visitation and custody as a single father. Would you be able to enlighten us with your experiences as a young single father?
Good afternoon to the panel. Mr. Anderson, Sandy.
Good evening.
Good afternoon to you, sir. I think we spoke on Facebook before, but we'll have an off-air conversation. However, I'm glad to be here as a young father. When I say young father, I mean in terms of inexperience. also in terms of not being shy to gain experience as well. So my journey along, 'cause I'm still in a journey as a young father with an adolescent child. Um, I was quite open to new ideas as a father because it was typically new to me. Um, I heard the term of single father, but I think I was single in terms of relationship, but not single as a father because I have a supporting arm, which is actually older folks, both male and female, that was actually there to guide me and still guided me along the path. But in terms of custody and sort of, I had a real hard journey and still having a hard journey in terms of a young man seeking custody of a child. There is a myth that, men can't do the same as women, but men could do. They can't replace a woman. But once a parent is willing to be a parent, no matter what age or gender, that is a responsibility that it can't go out the door and anybody could take that. So to me, I accept the challenge. It is very challenging as a young person, work-wise, with the not just managing work, but the concept of on work as well too. As so, what do you mean? The first thing they ask is, "Where's the mother? Where's the mother? Where's the mother?" So they don't believe that a man could actually take the responsibility without having a woman in the picture. So anytime you hear a young parent as a young male, it's always, where is the mother? Where is the mother? Who's the other persons in the party assisting you? It must have a mother there, man. So I have to consider that as a young person, I've been a role model to other young men who come to me for advice to say how you just do it, how you just get it done, how you continue to get it done. And to me, it's a real challenge, and I will try to motivate other young men to take up that challenge. Because when I now started, a mature man told me, he said, listen, that's the concept of single father. He said, listen, you could be a bad boyfriend, you could be a bad husband based on other woman perspective of what a man is. But one thing you cannot be bad of is a father. Because a father have a particular role and function that he must play. So that is my thought process going through this journey as a father, that I could be a bad husband, I could be a bad boyfriend based on that. But I make up my mind not to be a bad father. So that was what fueled me to continue to be a father today in this tough society that not do not take on male as parents, from the school systems to social work to even the courts. Sad to say. And that is something that needs to be encouraging. And if anybody else took my journey, they might have just left early and say what it is I done. I done. That is to tell you how difficult it is. I thank for this opportunity to share my thought as a young person and hope that it will open the eyes of other young men to understand that you can be a father as well too. Nothing is wrong with being a father. Might be hard, but you can be a father as well too with a supportive arm. That's the issue. Men do not have supporting arms. And that is a very, very important thing. I had older folks around me to guide me mentally, physically, spiritually. Sometimes as a man, I cry at night because I wanted to know, in this world, trying to be a good father seems to be a wrong thing. It couldn't be right. So I hope that it opens other doors, it opens supportive arms for males to come out and talk, to get role models in society as fathers, what is the real function of fathers, and actually defy the odds of what society believes that fathers is, because they don't. Right now, I think society don't know what is a father. So young men still don't know what is a father. So we are challenged as young men presently today to show a lot of young men what fatherhood is all about. So I thank you for the platform.
Well, I'm going to ask the experts now. Miss Mitchell, you have
Yes.
something to
I was just saying the same thing, Miss Clark. It would be wonderful to have the experts weigh in now, because Kevon raised an important and very interesting point. He said that he cannot take the place of but he can do the same as. And I would like the experts to weigh in on whether they see a difference and a distinction. Tomorrow is Father's Day, and I've often heard and seen memes where people would say, and to the mothers who are fathering their children, it is my personal belief that a mother cannot father. She can be the best mother that she can be, but a mother cannot take the place of, and I don't even know, but I personally don't believe a mother can do the same as. So I would love to hear the expert's perspective on this.
Mr. Alexander?
Sure. Just unmuting my mic. Right. Okay. I was just going through something today on a writer, sociologist, Edith Clark, who wrote about my mother who fathered me. All right. And it is said that Miss Barrow, which is Christine Barrow, sort of countered her claim to say that fathers are the ones who can father. A mother cannot father. She can only mother. Because you see, society has prescribed certain roles for the genders. All right? The mother or the woman being the main person who provides that nurturing and support in the home. So therefore, in times gone by, the home was her domain, her place, whilst the father or the male go out and, as it were, earn the money or the bread. So he was the main breadwinner. But there are many roles that were ascribed to women as a part to men. Because as the years went by, and as we have come into this new what we call contemporary society, all right, the role of both persons have changed in the sense that during the war days, right, the men went to war, the women stayed at home to see about children and the family, hoping that the males will come back. But it does happen that the woman had to go and look for work. And so by going and look for work, the role of the woman changed in the household. So she now had to be the breadwinner instead of the male. And so as we would normally say, this contemporary society brought about a shift in the roles that the woman played in the home. So the woman went out to work. And so the man came back post-war and recognized that he was marginalized in a sense. All right. So the woman was the person who was visible on the work site. Yes, there were some men who found work, but the majority of them were marginalized. All right. Again, if I could go back a bit in the slavery days, we know that the man, they were mainly the person who worked in the fields. The women, most of them were like servants at the home of the colonial master. But the new shift in who will go to work has changed. So no longer the man is the only person who's working. The woman is also working. Both of them are earning. And therefore, both see themselves as contributing. But when that situation that the man is removed from the family unit itself, whether by divorce, separation, or even death, right? That person now takes on, as the male, takes on a different role. It takes on some of the roles that the woman would normally do in the home. And therefore, it brings on increased burden, as it were, on him to function within his own ascribed role or prescribed role, and functioning alone. So if the children are very young, once that person, God forbid that that person was the only child in the family of origin, like the only child of mother and father, then that person may see themselves a bit overwhelmed in seeing about their children. All right. But as Kevin mentioned, that even though he was single in a relationship, but not in his position as a parent, he sought the support of other family members who he could tap into and get that support to see about his children, so that he's not alone in the whole aspect of caring for an offspring that belongs not only to him as a father or individual, but to the entire family system. Yeah. So yes, a male or a man can provide that aspect of care to his children, apart from a woman, once he is in a position to do so. We know that if he's not in a position to do so, then we have what we called in times gone by, we pass on the child to another family member to provide support and care. And that happened long before the welfare state came into being. Okay, but now we're seeing the state taking over the role, or the majority of the role, in caring for children by providing welfare support for those who cannot on their own provide the means necessary for them to flourish and prosper. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that historical note on how single father approaches began and how the view of single fathers started. Mr. Sandy, could you give us your expert experience and knowledge of the advent and the invention of single fatherhood?
All right, so good afternoon, everyone here on the panel, and also to the listening population as well. All right, so thanks, Mr. Carlos and Kevin, for sharing your stories. All right, you're exposing the other side that we don't really hear about much, our men and male in this society we live in, and I will see the stress that we face from time to time when it comes to parenting or being a single parent. You know, you are exposing yourself, you are being vulnerable. So thank you for sharing your stories. I do empathize with anybody who has some form of struggling or challenges with anything. But when it comes to single parents, I applaud you all for talking your truth on this particular platform. All right. When it comes to single fathers, I don't know much history as Mr. Alexander, and you could talk from a psychological perspective. All right. But what happens in being a single father is the total stress that we see from time to time. All right. And as Mr. Kevon, to bring a live example, he talking about time management. Your time is not yours. No, that was Mr. Carlos. The time is not yours. His time is consumed as a parent rather than pursuing his own personal goals. What about his finances as well? There's a lot of total stress happening there. And to mitigate those total stress, a good support system is necessary, as Mr. Alexander will know as well, and Mr. Clark and Ms. Clark. All right. Having a good support system mitigates those troubling factors. You have someone to look after the child while you pay close attention to something else. All right. And to understand something when it comes to single mothers or single fathers, we need to understand that the roles that we have, or socially ascribed roles as male and females, as Mr. Alexander mentioned, it's not that men are not parents. We're doing the same parenting. We just have two different separate components about parenting. As Alexander said, women occupy the private sphere while men occupy the public sphere. And this is springboard into parenting too as well. You will find if our father is parenting, he may try to inculcate more outdoor activities or more masculine ascribed, even chores and all too as well when it comes to parenting. All right. So being in a single home and having a daughter as a father, there will have some teething areas. There will be challenges there because we occupy as men a different role and function compared to a woman. So I think understanding that part is very important as a father. It will be a challenge. It takes a while to get it, especially if he's a single father very early in life, within the early childhood developmental years. So you have to live and grow and understand that perspective. And when we look at in psychology with the structural perspective, they argue that gender is ascribed to the traits and biological of the sex. All right. So you find men and women have different expectations throughout life, and they tend to put that on their children. All right. So it's socially constructed gender roles, as persons here will know, and we have to understand that. So I will leave that right there and offer more contributions going forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sandy. As you all were speaking, I was thinking to myself, the nurturer versus the provider. Way back with my grandparents, I remembered my grandmother would be at home and she would be looked at as the nurturer. I'm now married into a Hindu family, and the mother would be the nurturer, the one who handles the home. You look at the father as being the provider, but now because there have been so many changes, the demand is placed upon either parent, father or mother, who finds him or herself in that single parental role to be both, to provide and to nurture. So thank you so much, both of you, for helping us to get a clearer perspective of it.
Mr. Carlos mentioned that his daughter was, as we term it, a tomboy kind of a person. That's how we will normally in the society, because it's a social construction, right? A tomboy, because he's alluding to the fact that they were looking to see who is coming to register the child, And he was the one who was the main influence to his daughter or child in the family system. And biologically, her features were not pronounced enough for others to say, okay, this is a boy, this is a girl, you know. So he had to, and even his daughter had to understand after having or entering what we call the psychologists talk about dissonance. All right, they didn't on those who were there in the school compound couldn't identify with the gender because either well, how she looked biologically and structurally, all right, is the only thing that differentiated who she was a uniform, all right, because they had to wear a dress or a blouse and skirt, all right. But yet, the those who were looking forward to a distinction also had a certain amount of dissonance as understanding who this person was, all right. At one time, I was in a camp and I encountered a young lady similar to what Mr. Carlos described. Mainly, she was always in pants and jersey and stuff, short haircut. But when I heard the person spoke, I knew that it was a female. And I suggested to her, I said, you see, all these people who are looking at you and forming these thoughts about who you are based on your physique. How about putting on some earrings? You like earrings? And she said, no, I don't like earrings, you know. And she said she will come up with something, even if she has to wear studs to differentiate. But those are little nuances that we expect, we come up on from time to time. And again, Mr. Carlos's daughter was into sports. All right. So again, it lends itself to persons understanding within their social space, whether it's in a home, in a community, in a village, in a school, how a girl should appear physically and a male appear physically. Yeah. So I know that there it was. I don't know if Mr. Carlos had any challenges with his own in his own mind when he went to school to register his daughter. All right. But fine, but later on he recognized that treating with a child on his own posed some challenges, which one he looked at a solution that as a coach and as a person heavily involved in his church, his daughter came first because he didn't want having to put out all this time in his church activities. Then he will be labeled as a bad dad, a heathen, as we will normally say, right? He cannot say about his child, but he's saying about other people's children and heavily involved, making up his time in other activities, but he's not doing what he as a father should be doing to ensure that he give all the support that is necessary to bring up his child. Yeah, because in the end, it is the community and everyone else will blame him without even saying it in front of him. They will go and talk and say, he spent so much time with fathering other people's children, and he allowed his child to go astray in a sense, you know. So I'll pause there.
What I would like to ask both men, at the time of separation between you and your partner or the children's mother, how were you able to balance going to school, the social aspect, and the home? Was it tiring? Give us an explanation as to what were your experiences. I'll start with the younger one this time, Mr. Kevin.
No problem. At the time of separation, my son was small, infant. So I had was to pause on my schooling, still pause on it because of the fact of sitting down within myself and saying, listen, I have to make a sacrifice as a father. Wasn't able to continue on to higher education, learning, and I made a conscious decision to try to give my son a foundation, which is a learning foundation. I couldn't depend on, I felt I couldn't trust anyone to do that for me, not even the educational system. Because I felt that if I didn't get in that first 5 years of foundation in his life, that I may not be able to replace it later on. So I did some research, some talking, and I did some thinking upon myself, and I sacrificed my personal life, my education, everything to give my son that 5 years of foundation because we separated at 9 months. So I became his teacher, his cheerleader, the person to drop him and pick him up from school, the person to keep informed and build that relationship with the school as well, with the teachers, to be that child everything, to show that child that even though that you have lack of a placement of one parent, there shouldn't be a deficiency in the child. So that is what I spent that 5 years to try to instill into him. And I think I did a very good job with the help and support of others. And it was hard at times. It was really, really hard. I was wondering, should I go to school for 5 years and get higher education? Or should I, that maybe put me in a better financial position to assist him? Or should I give him that 5 years of foundation that he needs within his education that will allow him to be independent, that will allow me to be a little more at ease later on? So I made the 5 years sacrifice earlier to give him that educational foundation and sacrifice mine. And today it paid off in the sense that he has become an independent learner because he considered me as his cheerleader. So when I give him something to do, I'll try to explain the reason why and stuff like that and never allow him to feel that burden that I was feeling. And that is something that I know may sound hard but for others to do, but it could be done. Because a man tell me today 2, tomorrow 10. What you're doing in between that space is what is going to come. And I choose to make that effect in my son's life in between the space, and it paid off for me, even though he's 10.
Okay. Mr. Carlos, could you tell us separation from your daughter's mom and how you were able to balance school, social activities, and home?
Okay. Mr. Kevin had spoken about it earlier. So I just mentioned it in passing that there's a strong support system. I had a strong support system and that really worked. So when the separation took place, my daughter never used to do schoolwork at home. The nursery school that she attended, well, separation took place when she was in primary school, but the nursery school she attended, I used to drop her there early on morning, like 6:30 on morning, and someone from the nursery school used to take her to school. It was within walking distance from the nursery school. So for her 7 years of primary school, I would drop her at 6:30 on morning to the nursery school, and it was the head teacher there who used to take up in her schoolwork and that kind of thing. So that continuity meant a lot in that her life was just how it was before the separation, it was able to continue like that after the separation. Let me just add in passing, my daughter was A+ right through. So that it was just to ensure that her levels of whatever she was doing, that she was consistent with that. Of course, like I mentioned before, on my part, it meant that there's a lot of things which I used to do or thought I wanted to do or really wanted to do, which I couldn't do. But it's like you are seeing things in a different light now because I'm a parent, and parenthood, fatherhood to our daughter is what is before me. To the psychologist, I must tell you that I was introduced to Dr. James Dobson's book, Dare to Believe, I think is the name of it. I think it's Dare to Parent or something like that by Dr. James Dobson. And that was the foundation which I used for parenting. In a nutshell, it lays out what to expect at each stage of a child's life. Dr. Dobson had a second book, Parenting Isn't for Cowards, but that is for dealing with difficult, Dare to Discipline, right? That's the name of the book. The second book, Parenting Isn't for Cowards, is for dealing with difficult children. But as in, it set out a framework for what to expect with a child at different stages in their development and how to deal with it. So I knew what would be coming because of that. And then a part of the support system is that, and this is for mothers especially, it's Father's Day tomorrow, but for mothers, there are always a lot of mothers who are willing to give endless advice. They're always telling you, look, I did do this and I did do that and that work and that didn't work. There were 4 couples who always, but I mean, plenty of people that say, but that 4 couples, their children were between 2 and 4 years older than my daughter. And I used to take what they tell me because they used to tell me, you know, this they work and that they work, and I know they had me, and I know they were concerned about me and what was happening. And I used to take their advice. So I'll give you one example, not with these, not with the children, but when my daughter was going through puberty. Now remember, I used to be a boy. I can't remember, but I'm sure I used to be a boy. Then I turned into a man. But this was a girl who was turning into a woman, which was something which I never experienced in my life. And she was looking to me. I mean, she always visit her mother. She have aunts and grandmother, cousins who older, but she'd always come to me and question me. So I realized it's for me to answer. It's not for me to tell her, well, go to that one or go to that one. So I had to educate myself and give her the information. But one thing which stood out to me is there are these books which I used to borrow from the library. And when it's non-fiction, I would look for books which won an award. Like how we have the Caribbean Literary Award. I don't know why the name not coming to me now. But throughout the world, they have these literary awards. So when I go to the library to borrow a book for them, I would look for a book which won a literary award. And one of the books which I read, I don't remember the country now because it's so long ago, but they spoke about, the lady who wrote it spoke about her time when she went through puberty. And she said in her country, what they used to do is at the first spot of bleeding, the mother would take the daughter and carry her out into the forest. And she would have to, with a knife, she'd give her a knife, and she'd have to spend the next 5 or 7 days by herself in the forest. And then when the bleeding stopped, come back into the house. And that was their way of transitioning from a girl into a woman in puberty. And what the lady wrote, she said what she remembered distinctly about that is, on the first night, she was scared and worried, but then she felt there was a presence close to her, watching over her. And she realized that her father was there in the forest with her. While she couldn't really see him, but she felt comforted that he was close by and that no matter what she would have been, she was always protected. And all the fear about that 7 days went through. And I held on to that. It made me realize, well, yeah, I don't know about girls turning into women. I don't know about womanhood. But I, as a father, it is my duty to be there for my daughter and for she to always know that her father, me, I am there watching over her, protecting her, and throughout from the time the mother left, well, even now with the grandchildren, they could always look up and know that, hey, daddy or grandfather is looking out for us. Thank you.
Wow, that is so interesting. And despite the fact that you fathered a daughter and that Kevin is fathering a son, you all have both said it's important to educate yourselves, to have a strong support system, and to ensure that when there is separation or breakdown of the relationship, that there is minimum disruption, that there is the maintenance of routine so that children remain with that stability. But I wonder now if the experts can weigh in on when there isn't that ease in terms of transition, when there is conflict, how do we set about dealing with it? Especially speaking to the fathers when there's that breakdown and you don't have a positive relationship with the other party. Even if you may not have that support, how do you deal with the internal and the external conflict that comes about as a result?
Well, I know that when we have relationships and we form relationships, it's not for those relationships to be broken. It is not for those relationships to be broken. All right. We expect that the relationships will last forever or as long as humanly possible. But we also expect that when challenges come, because there will be challenges, because we are perfectly imperfect. You know, we are not without issues because we are human. And when the challenges come, we have to find ways within ourselves as to how we can prevent the situation from going in a negative way so that the family could remain functional, because that is what sociologists will come up with, right? They're saying that the family is supposed to be functional, all right? And so when challenges come and families cannot work along with getting or finding solutions and their coping strategies are non-existent, then they claim that the family is dysfunctional. All right. But we know that because of how families over the years have transitioned, they have been functional all the while. It's just that we have put or reclassified families and family structures and how in the mind of, again, we go back to the colonial days, how the slave master saw a family. He saw it as only nuclear, all right? A man and a woman married with a child or children in a home, all right? And so they could not fathom the whole idea that families, there were different family forms. So the different family forms that came out of slavery kind of changed the whole mindset and created a new kind of understanding in the minds of persons that here it is, we started off with nuclear family, which the colonial master was saying, pattern your family after this sort, right? But yet, as the relationships changed within the construct of the slavery, we found other family forms coming out of that. So they recognized that families would have had their own family structure previous to slavery, like polygamy. The Africans had polygamy, they practiced that. They had different wives, the men had different wives, and they had to provide for them. The families of this person will continue to provide and support in whatever way they can, all right? And it functioned, the family functioned. Even into today's society, the family form that is the accepted type, or the type that we should pattern ourselves after, which is the nuclear, that is dwindling. That is dwindling. And there are other forms that are coming on board, so that we recognize that it's not about non-function or dysfunction, but it is how persons prefer to structure their family to provide for that family to exist and continue to exist.
Wonderful. But Mr. Sandy, in spite of the changing forms and despite sometimes our best efforts and even intentions, conflict does arise. It's inevitable sometimes because both persons may love a child. Sometimes, unfortunately, my hatred for the other person supersedes my love for the child or blinds me. Conflict arises. How does a single father or a father who has to parent mitigate those effects, and how does he shield his child, especially when he's the primary caregiver?
Okay, thanks for your question. All right. I'm an advocate as well for parents staying together, but as you said, things happen along the way. All right. To smoothen out things, I will say having a better understanding about co-parenting. Don't mind in like the scenario that you talk about, they will have conflict and the other person might have resentment. I think forming associations towards the future. What is your motivation for that child? As Kevin said, he invested quite a lot. He sacrificed for himself to ensure that the child has a solid academic background. So tying your motivation to 10 years ahead, always see the end of your problem. I think that's a way to deal with conflict. There are some things that they could change. A person has developed their own personality, their own system, their own program of working. And I'm talking about the child's mother. So you have to obviously work around that. That will indeed bring on some stress for the person because only so much things that you could change or have control over. But what you have is some level of autonomy over the child's life. And with you trying your best to some extent, as much as within your parameters or limits, let that be a motivating factor for you going forward. All right, I would love to see my child experience this, and it will be very inexplainable if a child's mother does not expect the best for a child if the father is willing to go to that extent. All right, there are not much research on single fathers, especially in the Caribbean. And even globally too as well, we see 0.3% of any population having single fathers. So there's not much research on it. So persons wouldn't have a wealth of knowledge on how to advise persons better with it. But to see Kevin and Carlos doing so well, for coming from two different timelines, they have developed coping mechanisms or understanding how to deal with their children, which is remarkable. All right. And this is not an isolated case too, because we see children or we see the parents having cultural underpinnings like what Mr. Alexander talked about, slavery, unemployment, discrimination. Those are still things existing, and you have to manage that with your child's mother, who might not be on the same page with you. All right, so there's conflict all around, and I think that we have to think 20 years ahead to fix the problem that we're facing now. And this is definitely a step to identify certain issues. But of course, there will be conflict, but having an understanding of the whole situation, thinking it through, though there's make decisions impulsive decisions, but think it through, tying some motivation to it, where you want to see your child probably next 10 years and work towards that goal. But there will be conflict, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. I'm here to ask about, and both men, discipline your children, when to stop, how far to go, because we've seen on the social media and all over the news, some fathers going beyond. Give us a little insight. I will start with the older one now, Mr. Carlos.
Okay. Where discipline is concerned, I took my cue from Dr. James Dobson's book, Dare to Discipline. And what he recommended was to hold the child behind the ears and give the ears a strong turn. And that really works. You do a child, I only had to do my child that once, and I never had to do it ever again. And my child obeyed me. That was the end of that. Sorry, I can't, but that was extremely effective. Another thing about discipline, I always believe that if I have to talk to you more than once, it is that I haven't given you the proper message. And that is either that I've given you the correct message in the wrong time, or I've given you the wrong message at the right time. So I used to always look at it that it was up to me to give the child the correct message at the correct time. And that helped to sort out a lot of problems. When my daughter was in her late teens, early 20s, when she came back from university, and Kevin, you would experience that sometime in the future, and those of you who have older children will know there comes a time when our children view us as parents as the most dotish, stupid person on the face of this earth. And I always saw discipline as preparing for that day, so that when I can no longer speak to my child, they wouldn't listen to me, that everything which I would have told them to do, that they would still do it, because what I did concerning discipline when they were small, and I could actually tweak the ears or whatever, that it was done effectively and properly, so that in those later times, instead of them taking up a cigarette or a gun or whatever, that they would still, even though they're not listening to me, they would still do what I wanted, and I would be smiling to myself. Thank you.
Mr. Kevon?
Well, I have a different approach to Mr. Carlos. However, I still maintain the still old school because I didn't change. When your parent look at you, you're supposed to have that look to know your time is not now. But having been grown up from the old school and exist in the new school, I have compared both in the sense of I have a son, so I understand from early what are the barriers in between discipline and communication. And part of those barriers that I understand with boys is the simple um, statement of boys don't like to read. And if you catch a man that could read and understand, most likely he will be able to listen. So I developed an attitude that I encourage my son to read. And by reading, I started to test his ability to listen. And once I know he could listen good, then I know he could take instruction. And I left the fact of separating, knowing that I am everything to you, including guiding you. So I did the work in the earlies as a baby. So he will know the different looks on my face. He will know the different tones of my body and my attitude. And that have helped me up until the fact that he is 8 presently. It may change, but I think I will be equipped to change with him because we need to hold our children's mind, body, and soul and treat it like it's a sponge and put them in the right water for them to absorb that type of water we want them to do. And as a result of that, I am not leaving his side. So I made up my mind not to leave the side. So I have the saying that it have a difference with growing up a child and watching a child grow. So I took the path of growing up this child. So I must know this child. Even if he makes mistakes, I must know that it's a mistake he makes and be willing there to guide him in different forms. So I don't have just the ring, the air alone. With my little background within the military, I have a stern voice and an attitude and respect for him that I demand respect for myself as well. So I think that is working for me at this point in time, beside the fact of teaching this infant to read as a boy, and reading expands his mind. Reading allows him to ask questions and understand things a little better so that we can be able to communicate effectively as to when it comes to what to do and why not to do it.
What is so interesting is that we have these two fathers, two different eras, and neither one spoke to hitting. But I have found that societally, we have a fixation or a fascination. Spare the rod and spoil the child. I get licks and look how good I turn out. I want to hear the experts speak to this.
I always, when I speak with colleagues or other persons who talk about corporal punishment and disciplining a child, I always look in the past to see what were the challenges that were used and what we can learn from the past to use in the present so that we can develop and get the kind of tools we can use to go forward. All right. I know Mr. Anderson will talk about the developments and stuff like that as a child. But I want to go back to that place where when the male, the man on the plantation would do something that did not go down well with either the master or the overseer, as it were. And that man would be tied to a post in the on the compound. Every slave, man, woman, child, will be brought out to see the flogging. And at the end of the flogging, the slave will have to repeat to the master that his name is John Thomas and he will never do this again. He's the slave of Mr. Uric Thomas. He will never do this again. But the next time he does it, then it will be a greater punishment. And that slave will be beaten into submission before his family. And so that man was totally emasculated of his manhood, of who he was as a human, right? And he left the plantation with that kind of a mentality, as it were. It was ingrained in his mind, maybe in his DNA, because that is tantamount to some of the origins of the kind of violence we are seeing in our society today, and which is again practiced in the homes, because they see it as the only way to bring some submission to the child and to obey the person who is supposed to be the master of the home. And when that child does not obey, it brings shame to the family because there are some cultural underpinnings to how a person was grown up in a village. And as the Kevin said, they came out good. All right. Licks didn't do nothing to them. They went to school, they got licks, and they came out good. But the whole idea is that we saw punishment as a means of, as it were, beating the devil, quote unquote, out of the child, so that they would be the child that will walk a straight path and he will be well respected in society. But we know that with the books that were read, Mr. Dobson or Mr. Carlos, and other books that he would have gotten in the library would have guided his own mind as to the best way to bring up his child. Because both fathers, both of you, are the custodian of a life that God has given to you. And he didn't bring a manual. The child didn't born a manual how to parent, but the expectation is that you will do this with an understanding that you were once a child and you know how to behave and not to behave in acceptable ways, right? So you knew when persons visited, how to behave. You know, you can't go bothering your parents for anything to eat or drink, because that sometimes is the time when you think that is the best time to do it, because yes, mommy have visitors, so they will just give it to you. But I'm glad that you had your home rules. All right, you had that look. You had, my parents had a belt, so they always had it close by. When they talk to you once and twice, they go bring the belt and hang up there, and they put it right here. You can see it. So you knew that anytime you go out of position again, you will feel that belt. All right? And the same thing the slave master did to ensure that the slave was brought into line. But again, psychology has taught us that there's a different way, you know, and I know Mr. Anderson going to deal with that, right?
Please, Mr. Sandy, I would love to hear your views because I am a gentle parent. I'm doing this gentle parenting thing.
Oh, yeah. A colleague there showing some shade, man. I like that. But what I have to say, when it comes to discipline, of course, it has a lot to do with the parenting styles. All right. I will just give the parenting styles for the persons who are listening and for the fathers that have here too as well. All right. So we have authoritarian. Those are parents who are really strict and they leave no room for interpretation or discussion. So do what I say, no questions asked. And as Mr. Alexander said, if it diverts anyway from that, you may get a cut skin. All right. Then there are parents, which is the best one of the lots, which is authoritative. So those are persons who provide a balance between structure and independence. So they themselves and their child have a good relationship where I direct you what to do, but you can still ask questions and we can have a conversation about, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is required of you as a child. And the two latter is permissive and neglectful. And as the name of it, we know is something pretty bad. We just leave children to do what they want. All right. So I think when it comes to discipline, and it has a lot to do with the type of parenting style. Some persons may get a look and get a message, other persons may need to raise their voice and so forth, and they know how to operate as a child. But to answer the question directly, in psychology, we have a term called operant conditioning, and it does not involve flogging a child, right? It rewards good behavior, and it offers punishment for bad behavior. And the punishment could come in the form of taking away a device. In this time we live in, here have a lot of smart devices. Every child have a Kindle or an iPad. You take that away. They may like a certain food or a candy. You don't buy it for them. All right. And also, when it comes to positive reinforcement, you reward good behavior by rewarding them with something that they hold dear to their heart. So some children might like, once again, candies. So you buy candy for them. And when you mix the four ideologies within this operant conditioning, it's something beautiful if you pay it into effect. So while the child behaving good, you allow them to get what they want within means. And when the child is behaving bad within a split second, you take away one of those items from them. So combining those four ideology within operant conditioning, you don't need to flog a child. And if you combine the authoritative parenting style along with those factors, trust me, it'll be something pretty good. And the child will have high self-esteem. They wouldn't have low self-esteem. They wouldn't be frightened around you. They'll be more interactive with you, in fact. And they may ask you questions and stuff respectfully. So that is discipline. That is my contribution, and that is what I adopt. Sometimes you really may feel to hit a child or school a child. That happens, you understand, as parents, because they may be doing something pretty unacceptable. But try combining those aspects and you'll come out well. You don't need to flog a child.
That is quite insightful. And sometimes parents come home and they're so tired at the end of the day. They may have had a horrible day at work and they are just this close to snapping. And they may hit, they may scream, they may shout. But when we think about the fact that we're looking 10 years down the road and what we would like to produce in terms of who our child becomes, it can help us to hold ourselves, hold a little restraint. You know what I want to ask you all about as we're coming to the close of this afternoon's discussion? What about when a parent enters a new relationship and you have to bring this person around your child? How soon is too soon? And sometimes children have a parade of aunties. I don't know if either of these fathers has faced that challenge. Mr. Carlos would have had his daughter since she was 5 years old, and he would have made particular sacrifices. Kevin is now leading off in terms of his journey. He is nowhere near Mr. Carlos's age, and there might be the possibility of another relationship. So perhaps the fathers would like to speak to this first in order of age, and then we could have the experts weigh in.
From my experience is that children look up to their parents and obey their parents. So as a single father, I recognize that if I do it for my child, like whether it's schoolwork or whatever, I guide my child, the child would follow me. If I'm not doing it, then my child will have a very serious problem accepting it from somebody else who is doing it for them. So in the case of new relationship, to me, it always hinged on how well I was doing my parenting. If I was doing it good, then the relationship would be as relationships would go. Whether it would have problems or not, but it wouldn't be a burden on me and the child, because then the other person isn't taking up a role which I should have been doing and I'm not doing at all. So the child was rebellious. And to me, that was always the key to new relationships, that The child could always accept it from somebody else because this is what my father have been doing with me or for me all the time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Kevon?
Okay, in terms of new relationship, um, that is always something challenging, will be challenging, and still will be challenging. There's no clear cut to it, but my personal experience and ideology is to the fact of, because I had my son from baby till he's, maybe 8, 9, presently. And I've never exposed them to that aspect of my life. Within my honest, I've never exposed them to that part of my life. I have allowed to make that separation. Hence the reason for my total control over his behavior. Because now to me, when that exposure happens, when that child is not ready, then you tend to lose some level of control and you don't want to lose it too fast or you don't want to abruptly lose it because it might confuse the child mind. So I allowed my son within that foundation period, within the first 5 to 6 years, within his cognitive domain, to understand his immediate um, persons around him. He has a mother, he has a father, he have other siblings, he have grandparents, and that is as far as it is. So to me, I don't know what will happen in the future, but I have put that on a hold for the first 5 to 6 years within that child's life to restrict him from that part. So you only see in daddy as a shelter person. I'm his perfect father for the reason why I thought it was profitable and beneficial for him at such a young age to exclude him from that. So that is my contribution.
So let me
Um,
ask the experts, is it that parents should close themselves off to the possibility of a new relationship, at least for a while, or to give their children a sense of stability, or until they become X age or Y age, an age that you might be able to determine, or that we might be able to look at their maturity and determine, well, yes, I can bring somebody into my life now. What say ye?
yes, that is true. When a person either it had to be divorced, right? Because the person is no longer in the relationship, so they have given up that position of the other party within the relationship, or maybe if they're living a common law relationship, they're separated. That again has some things that they have to look at, right? When a person separates or divorce, remember there would have been issues that were building up. It just doesn't happen overnight, right? Issues that were building up to the point where either party says, look, I think I'm done. I'm done with this relationship. I'm gone. Some will say that they would not have anything to do with the family or their extended family, all right, or with the child, okay? But this is a situation where a blended family comes full square, because you're looking at bringing another party with most likely with their children if they have kids a little older, or within the same age bracket. All right. So that father man who is desirous of having this new relationship has to understand that it cannot just take place within a short time of them agreeing to go their separate ways. There must be a period of reflection, and there must be a period where each person will look at their own relationship that they had before it came to an end. What went good, what went badly, Was it any areas that I held on to that I didn't want to change? Or is it that the other party had behaviors and nuances that they didn't want to change? Or there was some arrangement that you wanted to get into, maybe buy a piece of land or something, or for the future of the care of the child or education of the child, and there was not that agreement, okay? But we could agree to disagree on how we can best parent, all right, and how best we can prepare for the future of that child. But other children coming into the picture, once that child, it depends on the age of the child, all right? If the child is young, under 10, maybe that child would be able, let's say they doesn't have their mother for a while, they might be able to get some attachment to that new person or parent coming into the life of their father. The other thing is that with the elder children, the more coming to adolescence, they will have an issue with coming into a new space that they are not accustomed to, one, and my father taking on a new partner or wife that squeezes me out, all right, from what I am accustomed to having or receiving. And therefore, I will no longer be the focus of attention in the home. There will be this new partner or these new children who I'll have to share my space with and share things that I will receive, gifts and stuff like that. All right? So that there will be less and less provisions in the home for me, because that individual, that adolescent will be thinking in a different way, all right, more concrete, in that, no, I have to talk to my dad about this. Once, and you continue to engage the child, especially those adolescents, because Mr. Carlos have already alluded to it, that he was in the forefront of his daughter's life. So continuous speaking, explaining, getting their feedback, because sometimes it's the Victorian era, my parents, they would just say, this is it, and you just have to go with it, all right? They don't ask your opinion, they don't ask you nothing, all right? So in this new contemporary age of wanting to ensure you get the best fit in training or bringing up a child, you want to ensure that you get their buy-in on the new relationship, what they think, and you tell them why you think you want to have this new relationship. Are getting a little lonely and that sort of thing. You'll miss the relationship you had, the conversations, the places you used to go, interactions with her or him, and that is some of the basis under which you try to engage the child, all right? With the younger children, you'll have to do some visits backward and forward from different homes, so that you're not going to sleep overnight. Well, that is my whole philosophy. You're going to have family time, interaction with the new partner, with the new children, so that they will get to understand the dynamics of how each person was cultured and brought up, so that they will now share those differences with each other. And I believe they will now begin to accept each other, know their own boundaries within the home itself and the new relationship that they want to get into. And later on, that two separate families could come together, all right, and form one family unit, what we call blended.
Mr. Sandy, from the psychologist's perspective, how can I, as a parent, determine when I can approach my child in terms of a conversation of this nature? You are about to get a bonus parent, as they are now known.
I lost it there for a couple seconds. I didn't hear the last few words.
Yes, how do I determine as a parent when it's the right time, and what are some of the strategies or tactics that I can use to get my child to buy into the concept of a bonus parent, as they are now known?
Okay, yeah. As a kind of a weird terminology that the new age person is using now. All right, but I think transparency is always important in everything that you do. Don't give children too much leeway, I will say, involving them in adult business. But of course, you have to have a conversation at some time, because if somebody new you're bringing into this household, they're still being influenced by external factors, the child mom or the child father. So that is also something to think about. But my advice to parents or single fathers today, do not shut yourself out from finding love, future love in the future. But just always think about who you're bringing into the household. Think about the person maturity level, the person economic status, all these things, because it adds values to the home. All right. Ensure that they can handle the entire situation of having a child mother to interact with at some time. Consider the child developmental stages too. They will be going through stuff. They will be reacting to things they're seeing. Do some self-reflection too as well, because I wouldn't sit down here and just say that all men are perfect. And in fact, some men are toxic, women are toxic too, and there are some things that a person needs to handle. And that is what probably caused the breakup in the first place. All right, it's something that has developed over a period of time. So, by not shutting off love, but at the same time doing some self-awareness is good, because in our field, behavioral sciences or psychology, one of the guiding principles that we always have is not causing harm to our clients. And if fathers take that approach or mothers take that approach, it's something is noteworthy. So within a relationship, always consider, I should not cause harm to my child. Always have that in the back of your mind. Who's the person you bring into this household? All right, persons may pretend to be someone and be very deceptive and easily turn to somebody else when they get married and so forth. They may pretend to have a certain job. They're just trying to catch you. All right, so keep in your mind of not causing more harm to your son or daughter, and also harm to yourself too as well. You don't want to bring somebody who comes under false pretense, and someone who can understand the holistic picture, not just the coming to a household, but they have to consider the child's grandmother, the child father, things like that. They will be visiting them. They will be coming back with different behaviors and stuff. So you have to understand that. And once you're mature enough to go into that and they accept what you have, your baggage, I will say, it's fair game. All right. So that's, I think they need to understand those factors going forward. But do not shut off love completely. As humans, we need companionship. All right. Somebody can make you a better person, of course, but also consider the other things that comes with it.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy.
Yes, thank you so much. Consider all the factors, but do not shut yourself off to love. Mr.
If I could just add, if I could just add something there. Throughout the relationships that I had when my daughter was living with me, and this I thought was a spin-off, is if I was in a relationship with a lady, like her bad, if my daughter used to treat her as a partner or a friend, I know that that woman not thinking of me as deeply as I'm thinking of her. On the other hand, When I saw that when my daughter saw her as a threat to the relationship between me and my daughter, I recognized that, hey, that person thinks of me as deeply as I think of her, or even deeper. And to me, it was a great litmus test. We men, we like, and we don't know if the other person like we. I suppose it's the same thing with women. But Kevin, with my daughter, she said, let me know, that woman like you or that one don't like you. All right. Thanks very much.
So as we are closing, we always ask the experts, which are the fathers and the social worker and the psychologist. And we'll start with Kevin. Give us your closing remarks. Tell fathers out there who are struggling, tell us what you want them to know about you being a single father. And
As a young single father, I think men have the key. Men hold the key to actual society and our children. Just picture the fact of how good our women are doing with our children presently, without our presence. Just think about how effective that child would be if we add our presence into that child's life. And that's my closing statement.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carlos, the grand expert at fatherhood. Let's hear your closing remarks.
As a single father, I would just like to say that single or in a relationship or in with a couple, you have the same issues. It's just that as a single father, it's magnified, and that we single fathers ought to recognize that it's not that our problems are unique. It's just that it's more magnified, and there are ways to overcome it. I like what the psychologist said, because I followed Dr. James Dobson, who was a psychologist. And I think what we as single fathers should do is really, we don't have the knowledge, but the knowledge is out there, and let us avail ourselves of the knowledge that is out there. Thank you.
Mr. Alexander, the social worker,
Yes.
let's hear your closing remark.
Single fathers have the tools necessary within themselves to get the job done. You have a plethora of extended families, uncles, aunts, grandparents who are still alive and who have an interest in their family, this child that has come into the world. They have claimed it as their own, and therefore it is in their interest to ensure that that child survives. And so in the past, when the women were the dominant person within the household, they knew how to make a dollar stretch. They will ensure that if they don't have it, they will go find it from other relatives. All right? So make and maintain relationships with families, friends. Don't burn bridges. We need each other to get the job done. Thanks.
So, Mr. Sandy, you are the main man here, but you have your private practice, so we'd like to hear about your private practice as well, and give us your closing remarks.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to be here to begin with. Thanks, Kevin, thanks, Carlos, and my colleagues there. Mr. Alexander on the opposite side of the discipline, right? So thanks for having me here. This socially ascribed role is quite concrete, being a father. It has been happening for centuries, and I'm certain that it wouldn't change no time soon, all right? When we look at the past, look at your daughters, look at your sons, but mainly daughters, right? When they choose a partner, they choose someone as the person they've seen throughout their whole lives. Looking at your father. So fathers have a responsibility to be a particular person, to be a protector, certain constructs that we hear from time to time. A person who is a provider too as well. So you have some aim to be that person because that will be the person that most likely a daughter will choose when they get older. All right. So always, when we look at psychology, we look at your history, and the history sometimes predict the present and years ahead. All right. So take care, have a level-headed, be level-headed always, and men speak out a bit more about the problems you have. All right. My practice is behavioral spaces. We involve in psychological assessments, mentoring, coaching. Feel free to contact us at 389-2241, and you can be contacted via our email as behavioralspaces@gmail.com. So contact, and we see what presenting issues and anything like that, and we'll see how best we can help you.
Thank you so much. I really do not think that we could have put together a better team to share their personal, practical, professional experiences and expertise with us this evening. I have gained so much. We know that we don't know, and that is why we brought you on board, Kevon, Mr. Carlos, Alexander, Mr. Sandy, because you know what men face. You know it from the perspective of men, and you can speak to men. And each of you has done so quite ably this evening. And I just want to thank you for having made the time and having come to share these nuggets, these gems, these words of encouragement with our audience. Happy Father's Day to all from Michelle Mitchell and SPAN.
And from SPAN to the listening public, we are asking fathers to be, please seek help, seek intervention, speak to someone. You have a grandfather, a male relative, a female relative. Don't be afraid to ask a question. You have Mr. Sandy there who's willing to provide his expertise, his skills. Reach out to someone. Let fatherhood be a beautiful time for a child that a child must enjoy. Let fatherhood be a moment of their life when they become an adult, they could say, my father was there. So we at SPAN, Single Parent Action Network, we are pleading to all fathers and fathers in the making. Please, please be a good dad. Happy Father's Day to everyone, Mr. Carlos, Mr. Sandy, Mr. Alexander, and to Kevon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a pleasant afternoon.